Chapter 1. The Long Road to Smallville. Narrator. The world did not end with a bang, but with a spark. 250 years ago, a glowing baby was born in China, and the clock of human innovation simply stopped. Why build a rocket to the moon when a man can fly there? Why solve the energy crisis when a girl can generate electricity from her cheeks? Humanity traded the stars for the mirror, becoming obsessed with the evolution of the self. Tech gathered dust. Science became a secondary thought. And for Izuku Midoriya, the world became a very cold place. Narrator. We begin in the silence of a darkened apartment in Musudafu. The glow of the computer screen reflects off the tear-stained face of a 4-year-old boy. The video of All Might plays on a loop, but the sound is muted. Inko. Voice trembling, standing in the doorway. Izuku. Baby, I made Katsudon, your favorite. Izuku. Voice flat, eyes fixed on the screen. Mom. Do you think I can be a hero too? Narrator. In the original story, she hugged him and cried. She apologized. She broke his heart. But here, the silence stretches longer. The air is thick with the smell of burnt grease and unspoken disappointment. When she finally speaks, the distance between them grows by miles. Inko. Whispering, I think you need a change of pace, Izuku. This city, it's so loud. Everyone is always looking at each other's powers. My mother called. They want you to come stay in Kansas. In Smallville. Just for a while. Izuku. Turning slowly, his eyes devoid of their usual light. Because I'm quirkless. Inko. Choking back a sob. Because I want you to be happy. And I don't think you can be happy here. Narrator. The transition is a blur of airports and long, flat highways. The towering skyscrapers of Japan, jagged with neon lights and hero billboards, give way to the endless, rolling gold of the American Midwest. The air smells different here of dry earth, cedar wood, and oncoming rain. There are no giant statues of All Might here. There are only silos and windmills. Narrator. They arrive at a farmhouse that looks like it has stood for a century. Two elderly people stand on the porch. These are Inko's parents, the Shimuras, who moved away from Japan long before the quirk era truly peaked. They don't look at Izuku's feet to see if he has the extra toe joint. They just look at his eyes. Grandfather. Deep, gravelly voice. Welcome home, kid. Grab your bag. The corn's high, and the chores are plenty. We don't care much for flashy types around here. We care if you can hold a wrench. Narrator. 1 week later. Smallville is a town where time has truly stood still. Because of the quirk wall, the global stagnation of technology, the cars here are rusted husks from 50 years ago, kept running by spit and prayer. Izuku wanders the main street. He feels like a ghost. He passes a group of kids playing. One is levitating a ball, another is changing the color of their hair. They don't tease him. They don't even notice him. In a town this small, power is just a tool, like a hammer. Narrator. He stops in front of a shop at the end of the lane. The sign is fading, peeling paint revealing a name, the House of Ideas. Izuku. Muttering to himself, a bookstore. No. It says, comics. Is that like the hero bio files? Narrator. The door chimes a tiny, brass bell that rings with a silver tone. The interior is dim, lit by warm yellow lamps. The smell hits him instantly. Old paper, vanilla, and the faint scent of cigar smoke and peppermint. It is a library of the forgotten. Narrator. Izuku walks past the front counter, where glossy, modern comics show All Might's Great Adventure, or Captain Celebrity, the movie tie-in. He ignores them. His feet lead him to the back, to a corner, where the dust motes dance in the sunlight. There, 2 shelves are tucked away. They look ancient. Izuku. Reaching out, his fingers trembling. What are these? Narrator. He pulls a book from the shelf. The cover is a vibrant, faded red and yellow. It shows a man encased in iron, a circular light glowing in his chest. Tales of Suspense number 39. He flips it open. His eyes, trained to analyze quirks, begin to scan the pages at a frantic pace. Izuku. Muttering rapidly, no biological markers, no muscle expansion, wait. Thermal thrusters. Integrated life support. If the suit is the source, then the pilot is just a person. But the energy required to power a localized repulsor, the second law of thermodynamics would suggest a massive heat bleed-off, unless the core is a cold fusion variant. Stan Lee. A voice like warm gravel, coming from the shadows. Excelsior. You're a sharp one, aren't you, Jimmy? Or is it Izuku? Narrator. Izuku jumps, nearly dropping the precious book. Standing behind the counter is an old man with tinted glasses, a thin mustache, and a smile that looks like it has seen the birth of 1,000 universes. He leans on the wood, looking at the boy with genuine curiosity. Izuku, squeaking, "I'm sorry. I was trying to figure out his quirk. Is it mechanical genius? Or maybe molecular assembly?" Stan Lee, chuckling, waving a hand, "Slow down, kid. You're thinking like a modern man. In this shop, we don't use the Q word." Izuku, confused, but he's a hero. He's Iron Man. To fly like that, he has to have something inside him. Stan Lee, leaning in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "That's the secret, kid. Tony Stark, he's got nothing in him but a few shards of shrapnel and a whole lot of stubbornness. He's quirkless, just like the bat fellow in the black cape over there on the next shelf." Narrator, Izuku freezes. The word, quirkless, usually feels like a slap. But the way this old man says it, it sounds like a title. It sounds like a challenge. Izuku, voice shaking, "Quirkless. But he's rich. And he's smart. And everyone loves him. The doctor said I couldn't be a hero because I didn't have the spark." Stan Lee, pointing at the comic, "Look at that circle in his chest, Izuku. That's the arc reactor. That's not a quirk. That's an idea. And an idea is the most powerful thing in the world. People in your city forgot how to think because they started relying on their genes. But Tony, he had to build his way out of a cave." Izuku, staring at the diagram of the Mark I, a cave, with a box of scraps. He looks up at Stan. Can you teach me? Not the hero stuff. The building stuff. The way they used to think before the world stopped." Stan Lee, grinning wide, reaching under the counter to pull out a thick, dusty textbook on mechanical engineering. "Kid, I've been waiting 200 years for someone to ask me that. Welcome to the Marvel Age of Engineering. We've got a lot of work to do." Narrator, outside, a storm begins to roll over the cornfields of Smallville. The thunder rolls like the sound of a jet engine. In a world of gods and monsters, a 4-year-old boy has just found the blueprints to a different kind of future. Chapter 2, Iron and Earth. Narrator, time in Smallville doesn't move in seconds, it moves in seasons. For Izuku Midoriya, the age of 4 bled into the age of 5 not through birthday parties or school rankings but through the calluses forming on his palms. In the city, he was a deku, a useless doll. In the Midwest, he was a farmhand. Grandfather, shouting from the porch, "Izuku, that fence in the south pasture won't mend itself. And don't you dare use those fancy knots, use the wire cutters." Izuku, wiping sweat from his brow, hauling a heavy spool of steel wire. "Coming, Grandpa. Just finishing the tension check." Narrator, this was Izuku's secret gym. He didn't lift weights in a temperature-controlled room, he lifted hay bales that weighed 50 pounds each. He didn't run on a treadmill, he chased stray calves through mud that threatened to swallow his boots. His muscles weren't the bulging, aesthetic peaks of a pro hero, they were the lean, corded strength of a worker, functional, dense, and built for endurance. Narrator, but the real magic happened at night. In the loft of the old red barn, tucked away behind stacks of winter feed, sat a workbench that would have made a modern scientist laugh and then weep with envy. It was a graveyard of old tractor parts, copper wiring stripped from abandoned radios, and jars of chemicals bought with pocket money from the House of Ideas. Izuku, whispering to himself, his eyes bloodshot under a pair of cracked welding goggles, "If the tensile strength of the nylon is X, and the weight of my body is Y, the snap-back force will shatter my humerus upon retraction. I need more than string. I need a polymer." Narrator, he looked at a faded page from an old Amazing Fantasy comic Stan had let him borrow. The web shooters were a fantasy, but the chemistry was grounded in a logic the modern world had ignored. Izuku, mixing a thick, milky fluid in a glass jar, adipoyl chloride, hexamethylenediamine, "If I cross-link the chains with a high-pressure catalyst." Narrator, the result was a spool of gray, translucent thread. It wasn't sticky like the Spider-Man of legend, but when Izuku tried to snap a single strand, it cut into his hand like a razor. It was stronger than steel cable and a fraction of the weight. Narrator, then came the mechanical heart of the project, the grappling hook. He had spent weeks in the town's junkyard, scavenging for a high-pressure CO2 canister. He found one in an old, rusted fire extinguisher. Izuku, Filing down a piece of scrap iron into a three-pronged claw, it has to be light enough to fire, but heavy enough to bite into wood and stone. Batman didn't have a quirk. He had physics. Narrator. He worked through the night. The sound of his small hammer hitting the anvil was a rhythmic heartbeat in the quiet barn. He wasn't just building a tool, he was building his confidence. He integrated a motorized winch he'd salvaged from a broken fishing reel, rewiring the tiny motor to run on a series of lithium batteries he'd daisy-chained together. Narrator. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon, painting the Kansas fields in shades of purple and gold, when Izuku stood on the edge of the barn's hayloft. In his hand was a bulky, ugly-looking gauntlet made of duct tape, rusted iron, and his super string. Izuku. Heart hammering against his ribs. Okay. Target. The old oak tree. 50 feet. Wind speed. Negligible. Don't die, Izuku. Narrator. He aimed. He squeezed the trigger. PSSSHHT. Narrator. The claw screamed through the air, trailing the gray thread like a silver needle. It buried itself deep into the bark of the oak tree with a satisfying thunk. Izuku didn't hesitate. He engaged the winch. Izuku. Gasping as he is jerked forward. Whoa. Narrator. He didn't fly with the grace of a hero. He swung like a pendulum, his small body hurtling through the air. For a second, he felt the terrifying, wonderful weightlessness of flight. He hit the ground on the other side, rolling through the tall grass, his heart singing a song he hadn't heard since the doctor's office. Izuku. Lying on his back, laughing breathlessly. I did it. I'm quirkless, and I just flew 50 feet. Stan Lee. Leaning against the barn door. Having watched the whole thing while sipping a cup of coffee. Not bad, kid. A bit clunky on the landing, and the gear looks like it was made in a trash compactor, but the science. The science is A+. Izuku. Scrambling up, beaming. Stan. Did you see? The polymer held. The winch didn't burn out. Stan Lee. Walking over and ruffling the boy's messy green hair. I saw. But remember what Tony says, Izuku. The suit or the hook is just a tool. A man is a hero because of what's in here. He taps Izuku's head, and what's in here. He taps his heart. Now, hide that toy before your grandma sees it. We've got a shipment of Fantastic Four issues coming in, and I think it's time you learned about unstable molecules. Narrator. Izuku looked at his calloused hands, then at the smoking grappling hook. He wasn't the deku of Musudafu anymore. He was the mechanic of Smallville. And he was just getting started. Chapter 3. The Seasons of Steel. Narrator. In the city, life is measured by the tick of a digital clock. In Smallville, life is measured by the harvest, the first frost, and the calluses that never quite go away. For Izuku Midoriya, the years between ages 5 and 7 weren't spent in a classroom learning about quirk history. They were spent in the dirt, in the grease, and in the company of a town that didn't see a quirkless boy, but a neighbor. Scene flash. Autumn, age 5. Narrator. The wind howls across the plains, turning the corn stalks into golden ghosts. Izuku is shoulder to shoulder with his grandfather, hauling heavy wooden slats to reinforce the barn against the coming storms. Grandfather. Grunting as he lifts a beam. Steady, Izuku. Nature doesn't care if you're tired. Izuku. Teeth grit, muscles in his small back bulging as he takes the weight. I've got it, Grandpa. Just center the gravity. Narrator. That night, Izuku doesn't go to sleep. He sits in his loft, sketching. He isn't drawing heroes. He's drawing the skeletal structure of a cow's leg, comparing it to the hydraulic pistons of an old harvester. He realizes that power isn't just strength, it's leverage. Scene flash. Winter, age 6. Narrator. The world is buried under 3 feet of white silence. The quirk tech heaters in the city would have failed in this cold, but the old wood-burning stove in the farmhouse roars. Izuku spent the morning shoveling the driveways of 3 elderly neighbors before the sun was even up. Neighbor. An old woman handing Izuku a thermos of cocoa. You're a godsend, Izuku. Most kids would be using an ice quirk to melt this, but you do it the honest way. Izuku. Smiling, his nose red from the cold. It's good for my shoulders, Mrs. Gable. Besides, ice quirks make the ground too slippery afterward. Narrator. Back in the barn, he uses the cocoa thermos to study heat retention. He begins sketching the first iteration of a thermal layer. If he's going to fly, he needs to survive the freezing temperatures of the upper atmosphere. Scene flash. Summer, age 7. Narrator. The heat is a physical weight. Izuku is at the local pond, fishing with a group of boys. They're showing off one using a water propulsion, quirk to scare fish toward his net. Izuku sits quietly with a rod he built himself, featuring a specialized, tension sensor, that vibrates when a fish so much as breathes near the bait. Boy! Laughing, why do you do everything so hard, Midoriya? Just get a quirk. Izuku, chuckling, pulling in a massive base because when the batteries run out or the quirk gets tired, the physics still work. Narrator. We find Izuku now, late at night, in the center of his sanctuary. The workshop has evolved. It's no longer just a pile of junk, it's organized chaos. Oscilloscopes salvaged from the 1990s hum alongside high-end computer monitors Stan Lee helped him acquire from a surplus auction. Narrator. Izuku sits at his desk, the glow of a desk lamp casting long shadows. He is staring at a set of blueprints that are far more complex than a grappling hook. These are schematics for a localized power source. Izuku, whispering, the energy density of a standard lithium-ion cell is too low. To power a flight stabilizer, I'd need a literal ton of batteries. But if I can create a self-sustaining magnetic bottle, a miniature sun. Narrator. He pauses, his hand drifting to a framed photograph on the corner of the desk. It's a Polaroid taken last summer. It shows Izuku, looking taller and broader in the shoulders, standing in front of the House of Ideas. Stan Lee has an arm around him, grinning like a proud father. Next to them are Inko's parents and a few of the townspeople Izuku has helped. Izuku. Quietly, with great power, comes great responsibility. You told me that was the true north of every hero, Stan. Narrator. He picks up a pencil and makes a final, decisive stroke on the blueprint. He doesn't call it an arc reactor yet. He calls it the Smallville core. Underneath, in his neat, analytical handwriting, he's scrawled a note, Phase 1, the Iron Heart. Narrator. He looks out the barn window at the vast, starry Kansas sky. In Musudafu, the stars are hidden by the glare of hero billboards. Here, they are a map. And Izuku Midoriya finally knows exactly where he's going. Chapter 4. The Architect's Rest. Narrator. Death in the city is a cold, bureaucratic affair, a name on a screen, a quick service, and the world moves on to the next debut of a top 10 hero. But in Smallville, death is like the winter. It's heavy, it's quiet, and it demands you stop and acknowledge the space where someone used to be. Narrator. The sky is a flat, bruised gray, hanging low over the cemetery on the edge of town. There are no black limousines. Instead, a line of muddy pickup trucks and old sedans are parked along the gravel path. A crowd of 30 people stands around a freshly dug plot. They aren't wearing silk or lace. They are wearing their Sunday best, work jackets cleaned of grease, flannel shirts buttoned to the top, and suits that smell of mothballs and cedar. Narrator. At the front of the crowd stands Izuku. He is 6 years old now, his shoulders broad for his age, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of a simple dark chore coat. He isn't sobbing. He isn't shaking. He looks at the simple wooden casket with a gaze that is unnervingly steady. Grandfather. Placing a heavy hand on Izuku's shoulder, they're waiting for you, son. Stan told the lawyer he didn't want a preacher. He said he wanted the kid with the wrench to have the last word. Narrator. Izuku steps forward. He doesn't have notes. He just looks at the people who grew to love the old man who sold stories of a forgotten world. Izuku. Voice clear, carrying through the wind. Stan wasn't big for fancy stuff. If he saw us all in polished tuxedos and shining shoes, he'd probably tell us we looked like a bunch of stuffed shirts, and offer to sell us a comic to brighten our day. Narrator. A soft, sad ripple of laughter moves through the crowd. Izuku. When I first came here from Japan, I was broken. I thought that because I was born without a spark in my blood, I didn't have a place in the world. I thought I was a background character in someone else's story. But Stan, he didn't see a quirkless kid. He saw an architect. Izuku. Looking down at his own calloused palms, he taught me that it doesn't matter how fast you can run or how much weight you can lift if you don't have a good head on your shoulders. He taught me that days and seasons pass, that people live and people die, and Mother Nature always takes her course. You can't stop the clock. But he said that every day passed is just one step closer to the end, so you have to make sure you do what you can for the people around you in the time you have. Izuku. Looking up at the horizon, he told me that was the true meaning of being a hero. Not the fame, not the costume. Just the willingness to be the person who fixes what's broken. Narrator. Izuku reaches into his pocket and pulls out a small, circular object. It's a prototype of the magnetic stabilizer he'd been working on, a small, humming piece of brass and copper that glows with a faint, steady blue light. He leans down and places it on top of the casket. Izuku. Excelsior, Stan. I'll keep the machines running. Narrator. The crowd disperses slowly, leaving Izuku alone as the first flakes of a late-season snow begin to fall. He stands there for a long time, watching the blue glow of his invention fade as the sun dips below the wheat fields. Narrator. He doesn't feel despair. He feels a cold, hard clarity. The grief has been distilled into a singular purpose. He turns away from the grave and begins the long walk back to the barn. He doesn't walk like a child anymore. He walks like a man with a blueprint in his mind. Narrator. Back in the loft, the light of the Smallville core is no longer a dream. It is a necessity. He clears his workbench with one decisive sweep of his arm, sending old scraps flying. He pins a new sheet of vellum to the board. Izuku. Voice a low, focused rasp. No more toys. No more gadgets. Narrator. He begins to draw. The lines are sharp, aggressive. A helmet, a chest plate, a housing for the core. Izuku. If the world is going to rely on quirks, then I'll give them something better. I'll give them iron. Chapter 6. The standardized testing of a genius. Narrator. Smallville Elementary did not look like the sleek, glass and steel schools of Japan. It was a sprawling brick building that smelled of floor wax and pencil shavings. In the city, kids arrived in high-tech hover buses. Here, they arrived in the back of dust-covered trucks. Narrator. A rusted Ford F-150 pulls up to the curb. Izuku hops out, his backpack heavy with books that would make a middle schooler weep. Strapped to his right forearm, partially hidden by the sleeve of his jacket, is a sleek, matte gray gauntlet. It's smaller than the first version, the rough edges filed down to a professional finish. Grandfather. Leaning out the window, remember the deal, Izuku. No firing that thing in the hallways. And try not to make the teacher feel stupid. It makes the PTA meetings awkward. Izuku. Checking the pressure gauge on the gauntlet's wrist. I'll be fine, Grandpa. It's just social interaction. How hard can it be? Narrator. He walks through the front doors, and the chatter of the hallway dips. In a small town, a new kid is an event. But Izuku isn't a total stranger. Girl with a minor levitation quirk. Whispering, hey, isn't that the kid from the comic shop? The one who fixed Mrs. Gable's generator during the blizzard. Boy with stone-colored skin. Yeah, my dad says he's a wizard with a soldering iron. He helped him rewire our grain elevator last month. Narrator. Izuku keeps his head down, his mind already drifting to the structural integrity of the school's roof, the perfect place to test the Mark II's new winch speed. He enters his first-grade classroom and takes a seat in the back. Teacher. Class, we have a new student joining us today from Japan. This is Izuku Midoriya. Izuku, would you like to tell us your quirk? Narrator. The room goes silent. This is the moment that usually defines a child's life. Izuku. Standing up, his voice steady, I don't have one. I'm quirkless. Narrator. There is no mocking laughter. There is no, Kachan, jumping up to set his desk on fire. Instead, there is a confused silence, broken by a boy in the second row, Caleb, the son of the town's lead mechanic. Caleb. Looking back at Izuku, who cares about a quirk? Midoriya, did you really rebuild that 1970s combustion engine in my dad's shop last Saturday? He said you did it in 3 hours. Izuku. Blinking, caught off guard, oh, yeah. The fuel injector was just clogged with carbon buildup, and the timing belt was off by 2 millimeters. It wasn't that hard. Caleb. Whistling, my dad's been trying to fix that for a week. You're a freak, man. A good one. Narrator. Recess arrives. While most kids are playing hero and villain in the dirt, Izuku is sitting under a tree, his notebook open, his gauntlet humming quietly as he runs a diagnostic. Narrator. He is interrupted by a shadow. A taller boy, a third grader named Silas, stands over him. Silas has a minor, kinetic boost, quirk that makes him the fastest kid on the playground. He's the closest thing Smallville has to a bully. Silas. So you're the smart kid, huh? My dad says you're taking work away from real men with that junk on your arm. What is that, anyway? A toy. Izuku. Not looking up, it's a pressurized pneumatic grappling system with a carbon fiber winch and a high-tensile polymer line. And it's not a toy. It's a prototype. Silas. Sneering, sounds like a lot of words for, I'm weak. Let's see what it does. Narrator. Silas reaches down to grab the gauntlet. Izuku's eyes sharpen. This isn't like Japan. He isn't afraid. He's been hauling hay and fixing engines for 2 years. He has farm strength and a brain that sees the world in vectors. Izuku. Calmly, I wouldn't touch that, Silas. The safety is off, and the recoil alone would dislocate your shoulder if you don't know how to brace for it. Silas. Pausing, his hand hovering, you're bluffing. Izuku. Finally looking up, his green eyes cold and analytical. I'm 6 years old and I'm drinking black coffee to stay awake so I can build a miniature sun in a barn. Do I look like the kind of person who bluffs about physics? Narrator. Silas stares at the kid. He sees the dark bags under Izuku's eyes, the Batman look. He sees the scarred knuckles and the steady hands. For the first time in his life, Silas feels like he is the one who is outmatched. He scoffs and walks away, but the message is clear. Caleb. Walking over, grinning, man, you're weird. You want to come to the shop after school? My dad found some old aircraft parts in a scrap pile. He said you could have 'em if you can tell him what they are. Izuku. A genuine smile finally breaking through. Aircraft parts. Are they from a turbine or a stabilizer? Caleb. Beats me. Let's go find out. Narrator. As they walk toward the buses, Izuku looks down at the Stanley Mark II on his arm. He hasn't made a friend in the traditional sense, but he's found something else, respect. In the city, he was nothing. In Smallville, he is a mechanic. And the mechanic is starting to gather the parts he needs for something much bigger. Chapter 7. The Calculus of the Sun. Narrator. Between the ages of 6 and 8, Izuku Midoriya became a local legend in the quiet corners of Kansas. He wasn't the boy who could fly or breathe fire, he was the boy who could make the old world work again. Scene flash. Autumn, age 7. Narrator. We see a classroom at Smallville Elementary. The other children have built volcanoes out of baking soda or posters about hero rankings. Izuku stands at the front of the room with a device that looks like a stripped-down jet turbine. Izuku. Pointer in hand, eyes glowing with a terrifying intensity, and by utilizing the Venturi effect within the intake manifold, we can theoretically increase the thrust-to-weight ratio by 15% without increasing fuel consumption. Any questions? Narrator. The teacher, a woman who has taught 3 generations of farmers, simply stares at him, her glasses slipping down her nose. She feels like she's a toddler watching a master architect explain the stars. She just nods slowly and gives him an A. Scene flash. Summer, age 7. Narrator. Izuku is in the town's main garage. He is chest-deep in the engine bay of a massive combine harvester. Caleb is handing him tools, looking more like an apprentice than a classmate. Caleb. Dad says if you fix this, he'll give you that old titanium alloy casing from the crashed weather drone. Izuku. Voice muffled from inside the machine, hand me the 10mm socket, Caleb. And tell your dad I want the guidance sensors too. I need the gyroscopes. Scene flash. Winter, age 8. Narrator. The workshop in the barn has changed. The Stanley Mark II is mounted on a stand, refined and battle-worn. But the center of the room is dominated by a single, massive drafting table. On it lies the master blueprint. Narrator. It isn't one page. It is a layered stack of translucent vellum. Segment 1. The magnetic housing derived from the scrapyard weather drone. Segment 2. The cooling shunt inspired by the thermal systems of a 1950s refrigerator. Segment 3. The plasma accelerator, a design Izuku spent 6 months calculating using nothing but a slide rule and sheer stubbornness. Narrator. Izuku is no longer just drawing, he is translating the magic of the old comics into the hard reality of physics. He doesn't have Tony Stark's billions, but he has the halted technology of a world that stopped trying to innovate. He finds the answers in the discarded junk of the past. Narrator. It is the night of his 8th birthday. There is no party, only a small cupcake left by his grandmother on his workbench. Izuku is hunched over a steel casing. He is staring at the center of the machine, the heart. Izuku. Muttering, his pencil flying across the page. Palladium is the traditional catalyst in the records, but it's too rare. It's too toxic. The isotopes available in the local hospitals are too weak. I need something that can handle the thermal load without melting the barn down. Narrator. He looks at a piece of the weather drone's shielding. It's a specialized ceramic tungsten composite. Izuku. If I can't use palladium to start the reaction, I'll have to use high-frequency electromagnetic induction to force it. A kickstart for the sun. Narrator. He stands up, stretching his back. His frame is sturdy now, built by years of farm work, but his hands remain the precision tools of a surgeon. He picks up a soldering iron. Izuku, looking at the empty center of the device. No palladium. No shortcuts. Just pure, clean electricity. Narrator. He clicks on a heavy industrial lamp. The light floods the workshop, revealing the polished silver ring of the first ever Smallville arc reactor Mark 0. It is cold, it is silent, but the blueprints are finished. The math is perfect. Izuku, whispering to the empty room, "Happy birthday, Izuku. Let's turn on the lights." Chapter 8. The 3-Second Sun. Narrator. In the history of the pre-Quark era, great things were born in garages and basements. Today, in a barn in Kansas, that history repeats itself. The air is thick with the smell of ozone and burnt solder. Izuku stands before a makeshift test bench, his face illuminated by the harsh white light of a single industrial bulb. Narrator. On the pedestal sits the Mark 0. It's a ring of copper, steel, and salvaged drone ceramics, held together by a prayer and the most precise welds a 9-year-old could manage. Izuku, connecting a pair of heavy-duty jumper cables to a rusted, salvaged car battery. OK. Initial ignition, providing the spark to jumpstart the magnetic bottle. Narrator. He flips a heavy toggle switch. THOOM. Narrator. The car battery groans, the lead plates inside sizzling as the arc reactor hungrily sucks every drop of chemical energy it can offer. For a heartbeat, nothing happens. Then, a faint, ethereal blue glow begins to swirl in the center of the ring. Izuku, checking a digital voltage sensor he'd modified with NCSA level firmware. It's holding 1.81 joules per second, it's exactly what the records said. It's working. Narrator. Suddenly, a high-pitched whine fills the room. The blue light flickers, turning a violent, angry purple. The heat coming off the device spikes instantly. Izuku, diving behind a lead-lined shield. Thermal runaway. The secondary core can't handle the. Narrator. Snap, clatter, silence. Narrator. The light dies. As the heat dissipates, the Mark 0 doesn't explode, it simply collapses. The metal had expanded so rapidly that the tolerances failed. When Izuku reaches out with a gloved hand to touch it, the entire device falls apart into a dozen pieces, like a jigsaw puzzle that lost its frame. Izuku, picking up a piece of the warped casing, his brow furrowed. The weather balloon alloy, it was too light. It's meant for high altitude, not high temperature. It couldn't maintain the structural integrity of the magnetic field. Narrator. He doesn't look disappointed. He looks like a hunter who just found a fresh trail. He looks across the workshop at the scrap Caleb's father gave him, the heavy, dark tungsten steel of a propeller blade from a 1940s crop duster. Izuku, grabbing a heavy angle grinder. Propeller blades are built for friction, heat, and centrifugal force. If I reforge the secondary coil using this, the density will stabilize the plasma loop. Narrator. 5 hours later. The sun is beginning to rise, but Izuku is oblivious. He has a new ring. It's heavier, darker. It looks less like a science project and more like a piece of an engine. He attaches a fresh, fully charged battery. Izuku. Ignition. Take 2. Narrator. He throws the switch. This time, there is no groan. There is only a deep, resonant hum that vibrates the very floorboards of the barn. The blue light is steady, a perfect, glowing iris of pure energy. Izuku, eyes wide, staring at the sensor. Stable. Temperature is holding at nominal levels. Output. 1.819 joules per second. Narrator. He does the math in his head instantly. 0.009 megajoules more than the previous attempt. It sounds small, but in the world of high-energy physics, it's the difference between a flashlight and a star. Izuku, plugging the reactor into a completely dead car battery. Let's see if you can give life, not just take it. Narrator. The dead battery, which hadn't held a charge in a decade, suddenly begins to hiss. The indicator on the charger slams into the full zone so hard the needle bends. The reactor doesn't even flicker. It is an endless well of power. Izuku, whispering, a grin slowly spreading across his tired face. I did it. A box of scraps, and a farm. Narrator. He looks at his reflection in the polished metal of the reactor. He isn't just a boy anymore. He's the guardian of a power the world hasn't seen in 2 centuries. He picks up a screwdriver and looks at the Stanley Mark II gauntlet on the table. Chapter 9. The Last Sunset in Smallville. Narrator. Energy is never truly created or destroyed, it only changes form. For 6 months, the Mark Zero arc reactor had been the heartbeat of the Midoriya farm. It didn't power a suit of armor, it powered the mundane. It charged Izuku's phone, it lit his workshop during the brutal Kansas winters, and it brought a dozen dead tractor batteries back from the grave. But even stars have a lifespan. Narrator. It is Izuku's final evening in Smallville. He is 9 years old, standing on the edge of the hayloft, looking out over the golden sea of wheat one last time. In his hand, he holds the reactor. The once vibrant blue glow has faded to a dull, flickering ember. Izuku. Tracing the welds on the tungsten steel casing, 6 months. Not bad for a first try, Stan. Narrator. With a final, weary pulse of light, the reactor goes dark. The hum that had become the background noise of his life for half a year vanishes, leaving the barn in a sudden, heavy silence. The Smallville core has given everything it had. Narrator. Izuku doesn't try to jumpstart it again. He knows why it died. The magnetic coils had finally degraded under the constant flux. He places the dead reactor into a custom padded slot in his suitcase, right next to a worn, yellowed copy of Tales of Suspense number 39. Narrator. He turns to his workbench. Sitting there, polished and pristine, is the Stanley Mark II gauntlet. Narrator. He could have upgraded it. He could have replaced the pneumatic winch with a repulsor drive motor. He could have swapped the nylon webbing for carbon fiber weave. But he didn't. To Izuku, the Mark II wasn't a piece of tech to be optimized, it was a memory. It was the last thing he built while he still felt like a student. Izuku. Strapping the gauntlet onto his forearm, feeling the familiar weight. Perfect just the way you are. Narrator. A soft knock sounds on the barn floorboards. His grandparents stand at the top of the ladder, looking at the boy who had arrived 6 years ago as a broken child and was leaving as a pioneer. Grandmother. The taxi for the airport will be here in an hour, Izuku. Your mother called. She's decorated your old room. She's nervous to see you. Grandfather. Walking over and handing Izuku a heavy, leather-bound folder. These are the titles and deeds to the scrap we collected. And some letters of recommendation from the local engineers. If those schools in Japan give you trouble for being quirkless, you show 'em this. You tell 'em you kept the lights on in Smallville when the rest of the world was in the dark. Izuku. Taking the folder, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you. For everything. For the coffee, for the chores, for letting me build. Grandfather. Grinning, though his eyes are misty. Just remember the deal, kid. 2:30 a.m. sleep schedule. Even in the big city. Don't let your brain outrun your heart. Narrator. As the sun sinks below the horizon, painting the sky in a final, defiant blaze of orange, Izuku walks down the stairs of the barn for the last time. He carries his suitcase in one hand and his legacy in the other. Narrator. He looks back at the House of Ideas, down the road, now closed but still standing. He thinks of the man with the tinted glasses and the mustache. He thinks of the Iron Man, who built a future in a cave. Izuku. Whispering, I'm going back, Stan. But I'm not going back as Deku. Narrator. He steps into the waiting car. The fields of Kansas begin to peel away, replaced by the memory of the neon lights of Musudafu. The quirk-obsessed world is waiting for him, but it has no idea that a 9-year-old boy is coming home with the blueprints for a revolution in his pocket. Narrator. The Iron Age is coming to Japan. And it's bringing the heart of Smallville with it. Chapter 10. The Prodigal Son of Musudafu. Narrator. Distance doesn't just change your location, it changes your soul. In the 6 years Izuku Midoriya was gone, the city of Musudafu hadn't changed at all. The neon signs for All Might were still bright, and the society still revolved around the singular axis of the quirk. But the boy who stepped off the train from the airport, he was someone else entirely. Narrator. Inko Midoriya stands in the center of her apartment, her hands wringing a tea towel. Without the years of sympathy eating, and the crushing guilt of raising a broken child, she looks remarkably like she did the day of the doctor's visit, slim, vibrant, but currently pale with anticipation. Narrator. The door opens. Inko. Voice small and hopeful. Izuku. Is that you, baby? Narrator. A young man because boy no longer feels like the right word. Steps into the entryway. He is nearly 4 feet 7 inches, towering over what a 10-year-old should be. His hair has grown long, a wild, dark mane with deep green highlights tied back with a leather cord. His face is lean, the baby fat, replaced by a sharp jawline. Inko. Gasping, oh my. Izuku. You're so big. You look just like your father, but your eyes. Narrator. She stops, her eyes drifting to his shoulder. He's carrying a heavy, weathered backpack. The right strap is missing entirely, replaced by a bright yellow industrial bungee cord hooked through the metal rivets and anchored to the bottom frame. It looks jagged, strange, and entirely out of place against the clean apartment. Inko. Worriedly, honey, your bag, it's broken. Why didn't you tell me? We can go to the mall right now and get you a new one. Or at least let me take it to a tailor to fix the strap properly. Izuku. Looking down at the yellow cord, his eyes blinking rapidly as his brain processes the request, fix it. Why, Inko? Because it's a bungee cord, Izuku. It looks like it's falling apart. Izuku. His voice steady, though his foot begins a rhythmic, subconscious tap on the floor. It's not falling apart, Mom. The structural integrity of the bag's canvas is at 92%. Only the nylon stitching on the load-bearing strap failed because of the weight of the lithium cells I brought back. The bungee cord has a higher tensile strength and allows for better weight distribution across my trapezius muscle. Narrator. He adjusts the bag, the metal hooks of the bungee cord clinking. For Izuku, his ADHD makes the world a series of fixed versus unfixed states. Replacing a perfectly good bag just because of a strap feels like a waste of potential. He doesn't see a mess, he sees a successful repair. Izuku. Stan always said, if it still holds the weight, it hasn't earned its retirement. It doesn't need replacing, Mom. It just needed a new way to work. Inko. Softly, realizing how much his mind has shifted, I see. You really have spent a lot of time in that workshop, haven't you? Narrator. Izuku retreats to his old room. He stands in the doorway, and for a moment, the mechanic of Smallville is gone, replaced by the ghost of the fanboy. The walls are a museum of a dead dream. All Might posters, action figures, and bedsheets. Izuku. Walking over to an All Might figure, examining the joint's static. No range of motion. Form over function. Narrator. He begins to move. With the same cold efficiency he used to strip tractor engines, he begins taking down the posters. He doesn't throw them away, he's still polite, but he stacks them neatly in the closet. The red and blue of the symbol of peace is replaced by blank, white walls. Narrator. He opens his suitcase and pulls out a roll of blueprints, a set of precision calipers, and the Stanley Mark II gauntlet. He places the gauntlet on his desk, right where his All Might lamp used to be. Inko. Peeking in, her heart sinking. Izuku. You're taking down your heroes. Izuku. Not looking up as he pins a diagram of a jet propulsion nozzle to the wall. I'm not taking down heroes, Mom. I'm just making room for the blueprints. Izuku. Turning to her, his green eyes reflecting the moonlight. The old heroes rely on luck and DNA. I'm going to build something that relies on the truth. Narrator. That night, the apartment in Musudafu smells of solder. The city outside is full of people with powers, but in one small room, a 10-year-old boy with a yellow bungee strap on his bag is drinking a cup of cold black coffee and drawing the future. Narrator. The Iron Age hasn't just arrived in Japan. It's moved into the guest room. Chapter 11. The Dinner of the Titans. Narrator. Dinner at the Bakugo household was usually a loud, explosive affair. But tonight, there was a strange, heavy tension in the air. Sitting across from the Bakugos wasn't the trembling, stuttering deku they remembered. It was a young man with the posture of a soldier and the eyes of a hawk, wearing a clean but well-worn flannel shirt, and his yellow bungee-strapped backpack leaned against his chair. Narrator. Katsuki Bakugo sat frozen, his fork halfway to his mouth. He was staring at the lean muscle on Izuku's forearms and the sharp, focused calm on his face. He looked for a quirk, some physical mutation that explained the change, but he found nothing but quirkless Izuku. Izuku. Taking a sip of water, his voice calm. This is great, Mitsuki-san. I haven't had authentic Japanese cooking in a long time. Everything in Kansas was either corn-based or deep-fried. Mitsuki. Wiping her brow, looking flustered. Oh, thanks, Izuku. I'm glad you haven't lost your taste for home. Izuku. Looking around the table, his brow furrowing. Where's Masaru-san? I noticed his shoes weren't by the door. Did he get called into work late? Narrator. The table went quiet. Mitsuki looked down at her plate, a rare moment of vulnerability crossing her fierce features. Katsuki just scowled deeper, stabbing a piece of chicken. Mitsuki. Oh, well, Izuku, you've been gone a long time. Not even a week after you left for America, Masaru and I, well, we got divorced. Don't worry, it was neutral. No shouting, just realized we were different people. Izuku. Pausing, he sets his glass down with a slow, deliberate motion. Well, that's too bad. Mitsuki. Her eyes snapping up, her voice rising in that classic Bakugo defensive flair. What? What's that supposed to mean, brat? You think I'm some kind of failure? You think I couldn't handle him? Katsuki. Sparking a small explosion in his palm. Yeah, watch your mouth, Deku. Don't look down on my old lady. Izuku. Not even flinching at the sparks, he just blinks slowly, his ADHD brain processing the outburst as an inefficiency. It's nothing like that, Mitsuki-san. You're overcomplicating the observation. Narrator. He leans back slightly, his green eyes scanning Mitsuki with the same objective analysis he uses for a circuit board. Izuku. I just meant it's a loss for him. You're a strong, capable woman who clearly manages a household with high efficiency. You have a few issues with temperament, sure, but you're still in your prime. You've aged incredibly well. Honestly, you look younger than some of the college students I saw at the airport. It's objectively a shame that a partnership like that dissolved. Narrator. The silence that follows is absolute. Katsuki's jaw drops. Mitsuki's face turns a shade of red that rivals her son's quirk. She's used to being yelled at, or being feared, or being called, old hag, by her son. She is not used to a 10-year-old boy speaking to her with the polite, blunt charm of a 30-year-old gentleman. Mitsuki. Stuttering, her hand going to her hair. Well, prime. I thank you, Izuku. That's surprisingly mature of you. Katsuki. Slamming his hands on the table. Are you hitting on my mom, you nerd? What is wrong with you? Izuku. Turning to Katsuki, his expression completely blank. I'm making a series of factual observations based on visual data and social value. Katsuki. Why are you shouting? It's a waste of lung capacity. Katsuki. Teeth baring. I'll show you a waste of capacity. Where have you been? You disappear for 6 years, come back looking like some kind of soldier, and act like you're better than me. You're still quirkless, Deku. You're still nothing. Izuku. Standing up slowly, his height advantage over Katsuki becoming very apparent. I've been in a barn, Katsuki. Building things that don't need explosions to be powerful. Narrator. Izuku reaches down and grabs his backpack. The yellow bungee cord catches the light, a bright, jagged reminder of his functional over fashionable mindset. He looks at Mitsuki and bows perfectly. Izuku. Thank you for the meal, Mitsuki-san. I have to get back. My sleep schedule is strict. 2:30 a.m. is coming fast, and I have a set of schematics to finish for a new power regulator. Narrator. He walks out the door with a steady, heavy footfall. He doesn't look back. He doesn't check to see if Katsuki is impressed. He just leaves. Mitsuki. Whispering to herself as the door closes. Aged well. In my prime. She looks at her reflection in a spoon. That kid is dangerous. Katsuki. Fuming, his hands smoking. I'm gonna kill him. I'm gonna find out what he's hiding and I'm gonna burn it. Chapter 12. The 12th year. The man-child law. Narrator. In the eyes of the Japanese government, the age of 12 is a funeral for a quirkless child's innocence. Statistically, they are seen as at-risk assets. To lower the suicide rates and clear the social ledgers, the Emancipation of the Unpowered law was passed. On his 12th birthday, Izuku Midoriya was no longer a child in the eyes of the law. He could sign contracts, work full-time, and walk the streets at midnight. He was a man with a child's face and a futurist's mind. Narrator. At school, the atmosphere is toxic. Katsuki Bakugo sits at his desk, his palms smoking, staring at the empty seat where Izuku should be. Izuku skips 90% of the lectures. Why sit through a lecture on pre-quirk history when you've read the original source material in a Kansas basement? Teacher. Sighing as he hands back a stack of papers. Once again, the highest grade goes to Midoriya. I've had to create an S tier on the grading scale just to accommodate his technical thesis on plasma dynamics. Katsuki. Snarling. S tier. He isn't even here. He's probably out playing in the dirt. Narrator. But Izuku wasn't playing. In the city, scrap metal was expensive, and specialized tools were locked behind support item licenses he didn't have yet. His mechanical progress had hit a wall. To vent the frustration, he turned to the only machine he had left to optimize, his own body. Narrator. He spent his days in a local MMA gym and running through the industrial districts. He practiced martial arts not for the sport, but for the geometry. He studied the physics of a punch, the torque of the hips, the kinetic energy of a leading elbow. He was building the software for the hardware he hadn't built yet. Narrator. We find ourselves at the Bakugo household. Inko has been taking double shifts at the hospital. She loves her son, but the constant smell of WD-40, burned ozone, and the sight of him treating himself like a biological engine is more than she can handle. She knows he doesn't need a mother's protection anymore. He's a legal adult who can outcalculate her entire department. Narrator. Izuku has been staying at the Bakugos more often to save on the utility bills he now legally contributes to. He walks out of the guest bathroom, steam curling off his shoulders. At 12, he is a lean, powerful specimen built by Kansas wheat and Japanese combat training. His hair is long, damp, and wild. Mitsuki. Walking into the hallway, stopping dead in her tracks. Oh. Izuku. I didn't think you'd be out of the gym yet. Izuku. Wiping his hair with a towel, his voice deep and resonant. The gym was overcrowded. Too many people showing off, power quirks and not enough focus on actual technique. It was an inefficient use of my time. Narrator. Mitsuki looks at him. Under the law, the person standing in front of her is a peer. A man, but he still has those green curls and that focused, deku, intensity. The air in the hallway feels smaller. Mitsuki. You're 12 today, aren't you? The big Emancipation Day. Izuku. Nodding, his eyes scanning the hallway for any structural repairs needed legally. Yes. I've already filed my tax paperwork and applied for a high-level technician's license. I don't intend to stay stagnant just because the city doesn't have a junkyard like Smallville. Mitsuki. Leaning against the wall, her expression unreadable. You're a strange kid, Izuku. You've got the whole world telling you that you're lesser because you're quirkless, so the law makes you an adult early just to get it over with, and you just take it. Izuku. Stepping closer, his presence commanding. The law doesn't define my capacity, Mitsuki-san. It just removes the barriers. Tomorrow, I can buy the high-grade copper and the specialized sensors I need. I don't have to wait for a hero to give me permission to be great. Narrator. He looks at her, and for a second, Mitsuki sees the iron in his soul. He isn't a child dreaming of being a hero. He's an adult planning a revolution. Izuku. I'm going to the kitchen to make coffee. It's 3 a.m. I have 3 hours of blueprinting before the sun comes up. Narrator. He walks past her. He doesn't look like a victim of a cruel law. He looks like the only person in the room who knows exactly how the world is going to break and how he's going to fix it. Chapter 13. The Dead Man's Key. Narrator. The government gives with one hand and takes with the other. On the morning of his 12th birthday, the mailbox didn't bring celebration, it brought the cold, calculated rejection of a society that feared a quirkless man with an S-tier brain. Narrator. Izuku stands in the hallway of the Bakugo home, 3 envelopes in his hand. He opens them with the precision of a surgeon. Izuku. Reading the first letter, his voice flat. Application for adult ID and tax filing, denied. Reason. Mental instability cited in quirkless minors. All legal rights deferred to guardian until age 18. Narrator. He opens the second. Izuku. Notice of restriction. Izuku Midoriya is hereby barred from all industrial scrapyards and salvage zones. These materials are reserved for citizens with metallurgy or construction-based quirks. Unauthorized entry will be treated as a felony. Narrator. They were trying to starve him. They saw the Smallville core blueprints in his head and they were trying to take away his wrench. Izuku's grip tightens on the paper, his knuckles turning white. His ADHD brain is already firing, looking for a workaround, a loophole, a way to fight a system that owns the metal. Narrator. Then, he opens the third. It isn't a letter, it's a heavy, padded envelope from Kansas. Inside is a single, rusted black key on a leather strap and a piece of yellowed parchment. Izuku. Whispering, Stan. Narrator. The letter is dated 3 years ago. It's the jagged, shaky handwriting of a man who knew he was at the finish line. Kid, if you're reading this, the world is probably trying to tell you, no. They're good at that, but a hero doesn't ask for permission. In the barn, under the false floorboards in the back stall. There's a beast waiting for you. It's older than the first glowing baby. It's a 1978 Dodge Charger. No quirks, no computers, just 440 cubic inches of stubbornness. It's yours, Izuku. Don't let the rust win. Excelsior. Narrator. 5 minutes later. The sound of a heavy flatbed truck rumbles outside the Bakugo house. Mitsuki and Katsuki run to the window as a massive, black tarpaulin-covered shape is lowered into the driveway. Narrator. Izuku walks out into the cool morning air. He pulls the tarp away. Narrator. It is a monster of black steel and chrome. The 1978 Dodge Charger sits there like a sleeping predator. It's dusty, the paint is matte, and the engine block is exposed, showing the raw, mechanical heart of the pre-quirk era. To any other kid, it's a relic. To Izuku, it's a sanctuary. Katsuki. Walking out, eyes wide. What the hell is this junk, Deku? It smells like a gas station. You can't even drive this. It's illegal to have combustion engines in the city. Izuku. Running a hand over the cold steel of the hood, a small, dangerous smile tugging at his lips. It's not junk, Katsuki. It's a gift, and under the Historic Preservation Act of 2104, as long as I maintain it as a legacy vehicle, the city can't touch it. Mitsuki. Walking up, looking at the sheer size of the car. Izuku, you're not going to take this apart for your projects, are you? Izuku. His voice firm, sounding more like Stan Lee than himself. This is the only thing I won't touch. Every bolt, every piston, it stays original. This isn't a mark or a prototype. This is a promise. Narrator. He climbs into the driver's seat. The leather is cracked, and the interior smells of old Kansas dust and peppermint. He slides the black key into the ignition. He doesn't turn it, not yet. He just sits there, shielded by 2 tons of American iron. Izuku. To himself, you gave me the metal, Stan. Now I just have to build the fire. Narrator. In the driveway of a modern, quirk-obsessed neighborhood, the 1978 Charger looks like a ghost from a more honest time. The government took his right to buy scrap, but they forgot one thing: Izuku Midoriya is a mechanic. And a mechanic with a Dodge Charger doesn't need a scrap yard. He has a mobile base of operations. Chapter 14. The Hybrid Exclusion. Narrator. Law is a rigid thing, but for a mind that sees in blueprints and binary, it is merely a puzzle to be solved. Izuku sat at the kitchen table of the Bakugo household, the 3 a.m. coffee steaming beside him. Spread out before him were the Transit and Energy Regulation Acts, from 100 years prior, the era when the world tried, and failed, to bridge the gap between old fuel and new quirks. Izuku. Muttering, his pen circling a specific paragraph in a dusty legal tome. Here it is. The Dual Input Volatility Act. Narrator. He read the text carefully. A century ago, as electricity-based quirks became common, people tried to jumpstart hybrid cars with their own bodies. The results were catastrophic. The complex interplay between combustion engines and electric batteries couldn't handle the raw, uneven voltage of a human quirk. After a series of city-leveling explosions, the Japanese government banned hybrid engines entirely. Izuku. A small, triumphant smirk appearing. So, it doesn't matter if it's a legacy car. Because the Charger is 100% internal combustion with a single lead-acid battery, it's safer in the eyes of the law than a modern city car. As long as I don't mod the exterior to the point of a public nuisance, I can drive it to the grocery store if I want to. Narrator. He leaned back, his mind already calculating the fuel-to-air ratio needed for the Musudafu humidity. He was so deep in the S-tier depths of his own head that he didn't hear the bathroom door open down the hall. Narrator. Mitsuki Bakugo walked into the kitchen. She had just stepped out of a steaming shower, wrapped in nothing but a fluffy white towel, her hair damp and wild. She was half asleep, her brain operating on autopilot, the same autopilot that for years had seen her tending to a husband or a son in this very kitchen. Mitsuki. Drowsily. Still up, babe? You're going to run yourself ragged. Narrator. In her sleep-deprived fog, she leaned over the table. She didn't see a 12-year-old boy. She saw a broad-shouldered, hard-working male figure hunched over paperwork at 3 a.m. She leaned down and pressed a soft, lingering kiss to Izuku's forehead. Mitsuki. Whispering, don't be late for bed. Narrator. She took 3 steps toward the hallway before the cold air hit her skin and the reality of the situation hit her brain. She froze. Her eyes went wide, the fog of sleep vanishing instantly as she realized she had just kissed the quirkless kid, who was legally a man. Izuku. Frozen, his pen hovering over the page, his green eyes slowly looking up at her. Mitsuki-san. Mitsuki. Her face turning a shade of red that looked like an impending explosion. That was. You were. Izuku. His ADHD brain struggling to categorize the data. I am assuming that was a subconscious reflex triggered by a domestic routine. You likely mistook my silhouette for Masaru-san's due to the low lighting and the similar hour of the night. Narrator. He paused, looking at her with a terrifyingly calm, analytical gaze. Izuku. However, given the current legal status of my adulthood and the lack of a biological relation, that action carries a significant set of social implications that I am currently unprepared to calculate. Also, your towel is slipping approximately 2 centimeters on the left side. Mitsuki. Letting out a choked, embarrassed scream and clutching the towel. Shut up. Just shut up and look at your stupid car laws. Narrator. She bolted down the hallway, the sound of her bedroom door slamming echoing through the house like a thunderclap. Izuku. Blinking, his face remains neutral but a slight tint of pink colors his cheeks. Social engineering is significantly more volatile than thermodynamics. Narrator. He turned back to his books, though his heart was hammering against his ribs in a way that no amount of coffee could explain. He forced his eyes back to the text. He had a car to license and a world to change. He couldn't afford to let his human hardware glitch out over a domestic error. Izuku. To himself focus. Izuku. 440 cubic inches. Single battery. Legal. Narrator. But as he wrote, his hand shook just a fraction. The Iron Age was starting, but the man inside the mechanic was realizing that life in Japan was going to be a lot more complicated than life in the barn. Chapter 15. The Pressure Cooker. The house was too quiet. In Smallville, the silence was peaceful, the sound of wind through the wheat. In Musutafu, the silence was heavy, like the air right before a thunderstorm. Izuku sat at the kitchen table, but he wasn't looking at the legal books anymore. His mind was looping. He had spent years learning how to fix engines and balance power grids, but Stan had never given him a manual for this. His ADHD made it hard to filter out the sensory details. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock, and the lingering scent of Mitsuki's floral shampoo that seemed to have glitched into his system after that accidental forehead kiss. He heard the floorboards creak. Mitsuki walked back into the kitchen an hour later. She wasn't wearing the towel anymore, but she wasn't exactly composed either. She had thrown on a silk robe that looked like it had seen better days, and in her right hand, she clutched a half-empty bottle of expensive red wine. Her eyes were bloodshot, shimmering with a mix of frustration and a deep-seated loneliness that she usually hid behind explosions and shouting. Still awake, adult, she slurred, the word adult dripping with a bitter irony. She leaned against the doorframe, taking a long swig directly from the bottle. It's 4 a.m., Mitsuki-san, Izuku said, his voice steady but lower than usual. He didn't look up from his papers. You should be sleeping. Alcohol is a depressant, it's only going to make the cortisol levels from your stress higher. Shut up with the logic, Izuku. Just for one night, shut up. She snapped, though there was no heat in it. She stumbled forward, the smell of wine reaching him before she did. She set the bottle down on his blueprints with a heavy thud, staining the corner of a stabilizer diagram purple. She looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the scars on his hands from the farm, the way his shoulders filled out his shirt, and the way he didn't flinch when she got close. He wasn't the deku she had known. He was a man who had been forged in a different world, and for a woman who had just watched her marriage crumble in a city full of fake smiles and hero worship, that, Smallville, honesty was like a magnet. You think you're so grown up, she whispered, reaching out to grab his collar. Her grip was tight, her knuckles trembling. You come back here with your big words and your S-tier brain in that stupid car, and you look at everyone like they're a machine you can just fix. Izuku finally looked up. He didn't see a mom's friend, or a scary lady. He saw someone who was breaking. His ADHD brain usually looked for a mechanical solution, but as she pulled him closer, the social engineering he tried to avoid suddenly became the only thing in the room. I don't think I can fix people, Mitsuki-san, Izuku said softly, his hand instinctively reaching up to steady her arm. But I know when a system is under too much pressure. You're redlining. You've been redlining since I got back. Then let me blow off some steam, she hissed, her face inches from his. She didn't wait for an answer. She grabbed his arm, the one that still carried the farm strength, and pulled him toward the hallway. Izuku stumbled, his mind racing through 1,000 different outcomes. Logic told him this was a mistake. Logic told him this was a violation of every social contract he knew. But as she dragged him into the dim light of the bedroom, the mechanic side of him went quiet, replaced by a raw, human curiosity and a need to finally feel something other than the cold steel of a wrench. The door clicked shut, the sound final and heavy. The next morning, the sun was an enemy. Izuku groaned as a shard of bright Musudafu sunlight pierced through the gap in the curtains, hitting him right between the eyes. It felt like someone was taking a ball-peen hammer to his skull. A migraine sharp, rhythmic, and relentless throbbed in time with his heartbeat. He tried to sit up, but his body felt heavy, his muscles aching in a way that had nothing to do with weightlifting. He looked around the room, the hazy memories of the night before flickering through his mind like a corrupted video file. The smell of wine was still in the air, mixed with the faint scent of his own machine oil. He rubbed his temples, his eyes landing on the digital clock on the bedside table. 10:14 a.m., 2:30 a.m. limit, he croaked, his voice raspy. I broke the deal, Grandpa. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, the movement making his head spin. He was a legal adult, a genius, and the owner of a '78 Charger, but as he sat there in the silence of the morning after, he realized that no blueprint in the world could have prepared him for the variables of the human heart. He needed coffee, he needed a dark room, and more than anything, he needed to get to the garage. The car didn't have feelings. The car didn't drink wine. The car followed the laws of physics, and right now, physics was the only thing that made sense.